No music. No warning. Just the sound of a man screaming inside a mansion that never heard fear. The scream came from the basement. And when the guards rushed downstairs, they expected to find an enemy, a snitch, a traitor. But what they found was worse. They found the Don's son standing over a kneeling man, hands shaking, breathing like he'd been drowning. The kneeling man, one of the family's most loyal enforcers, had tears in his eyes. And on the concrete floor between them lay a single object that didn't belong there. A small velvet pouch, spilled open, revealing a ring. A ring the Don never took off. A ring that only came off one way. In this world, you don't remove a king's ring. Unless the king is already dead. The Marcelli estate sat above Crown Point, Indiana, like a castle built for sinners. Every window was bulletproof. Every hallway had cameras. Every door had a lock that opened only for blood. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. And inside that fortress lived a boy who was never allowed to forget one brutal truth. He was not what a Marcelli heir was supposed to be. His name was Nico Marcelli. 17 years old. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Built like his father. But there was something missing behind his eyes. Not intelligence. Not strength. Something darker. The thing men in this life called the bite. The instinct. The hunger. The coldness that made people step back without knowing why. The Don had it. The capos had it. Even the young soldiers had it, boys barely old enough to shave, already laughing about violence like it was a sport. But Nico looked away when men got hit. Nico clenched his jaw when blood appeared. Nico spoke softly, and apologized too much, and didn't like guns. In another life, he'd have been a good kid. In this one, he was a problem waiting to happen. So the whispers started early. They always start early. He's soft. He's a saint in a devil's house. The Don's bloodline ends with him. And the worst whisper of all. He was born wrong. The Don's real name was Vittorio Marcelli, but nobody used it. They called him Don Marcelli, or Mr. V, or simply Boss. He ran Crown Point like a private kingdom. The docks, the unions, the casinos, the trucking routes, the city council seats. If something moved through Indiana at night, money, drugs, weapons, Marcelli hands had touched it. And when people spoke of Don Marcelli, they spoke in the same tone they used for storms. Not because he was loud. Because he was inevitable. In public, the Don called Nico his son. In private, he called him something else. A liability. Nico heard it once through a cracked office door. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was just walking past, quiet like always, invisible like always. He froze when he heard his father's voice. If he can't do what a Marcelli does, the family will eat him alive. Another voice answered. Older. Rough. Capo Salvatore Griggs. The Don's right hand. A man who never smiled unless someone begged. Let me train him harder. The Don exhaled like he was tired of breathing. You can't train what isn't in his bones. Nico walked away without making a sound. Because in this house, even pain had rules. Her name was Imani Wells. And no one important ever said it. She was 24, black American, raised in Gary, Indiana, close enough to the fire to feel the heat, far enough to never get warmth from it. Imani cleaned the Marcelli estate because she had bills stacked like bricks, a younger brother with asthma, and a mother whose body had given out too early. She didn't have the luxury of pride. She had the habit of silence. In that mansion, silence was survival. She moved like a shadow, vacuuming carpets that cost more than her yearly rent, polishing marble floors that never felt human footsteps. The guards barely looked at her. The capos walked past her as if she were furniture. And that was fine. Because Imani had learned something about predators. The ones you should fear most aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who don't notice you. Because they don't have to. Imani had been invisible her whole life. But invisibility had a gift. You see everything. You hear everything. And on the first day she noticed Nico. She realized he wasn't like them. He wasn't like his father. He wasn't like the men who joked about breaking bones as if it was a hobby. Nico would pause in hallways and let staff pass. He'd lower his eyes when he saw bruises. He'd look like he wanted to speak, and didn't know how. Most people in that mansion saw weakness. Imani saw something else. A boy trapped in a life that wanted to make him a monster. 2 weeks later, the mansion hosted a private dinner. 3 black SUVs arrived. Men in suits stepped out, clean cuts, hard eyes, hand bulges under jackets. A rival crew from Chicago had come for negotiations. And Don Marcelli decided this was the night he would stop the whispers. He brought Nico to the dining room. Not as a guest. As a display. Nico wore a tailored black suit, hair combed back, jaw tight. He looked like a prince who hated the crown. The Chicago capo, Raphael Rafe de Luca, grinned across the table. So this is the famous heir. Nico kept his face blank. The Don poured wine slowly. His learning. Rafe leaned back, amused. Learning what? How to apologize. The room chuckled, soft, dangerous laughter. Nico's knuckles whitened around his glass. Rafe continued, eyes glittering. I heard he's never pulled a trigger. The Don's smile didn't move. Only his eyes hardened. He hasn't needed to. Rafe's grin widened. Maybe he's not a Marcelli, then. The air changed. Even Imoni felt it from the corner, holding a tray like a statue. Nico's breathing became shallow. The Don finally turned his gaze toward his son. It wasn't fatherly. It was command. Nico, he said calmly, show them you're mine. Nico swallowed. Rafe raised his eyebrows like he couldn't wait. The Don nodded once toward the doorway. 2 guards dragged in a man. The man's face was swollen. His wrists were zip-tied behind his back. A traitor. Someone they'd caught skimming money, maybe. The traitor screamed when he saw the table. Boss, please, please. The Don spoke as if ordering dessert. My son will handle it. The room went silent. Nico stood slowly. His chair scraped the floor like a scream you couldn't stop. He walked toward the man. Every step looked heavy. The traitor's eyes locked onto Nico's. And in those eyes, Nico saw himself. Not as the heir. As the victim. Because that's what he was, too, just dressed better. The Don placed a pistol on the table with a gentle click. He slid it toward Nico. Imoni's stomach tightened. This was it. The moment that would decide whether Nico was a prince. Or prey. Nico picked up the gun. His hand trembled. The traitor sobbed. Please, kid, please. I got children. Rafe smirked, watching like it was entertainment. The Don's voice stayed calm. Do it. Nico raised the pistol. But the barrel didn't steady. It shook like a leaf in a storm. He looked at his father. A silent plea. Not for mercy. For permission to be something else. But the Don's face was stone. Do it, he repeated, quieter this time. Nico's eyes filled, just barely, like his body wanted to betray him with emotion. He aimed. The traitor squeezed his eyes shut. Imoni couldn't breathe. And then, Nico lowered the gun. The entire room froze. Rafe laughed once, sharp and cruel. Wow. The Don stood up slowly. The chair behind him didn't move. It was like the room moved away from him instead. He walked toward Nico. Close enough that Nico could smell his father's cologne, expensive and cold. The Don leaned in. And in a voice only Nico could hear, he whispered. You embarrass me. Nico's face broke, not in tears, but in something worse. Shame. The Don took the gun from his son's hand. Then he turned to the traitor. Bang. One shot. Clean. The traitor collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Blood crept across the marble. No one flinched. Not even Rafe. The Don wiped the gun with a napkin as if correcting a mistake. Then he looked at Nico. Go upstairs. Nico didn't move. The Don's eyes narrowed. Now. Nico backed away slowly, like a child leaving a room where a parent was angry. He walked out. And something in him cracked. Imoni watched him disappear into the hallway. And for the first time since she worked there, she made a decision that could get her killed. She followed. Imoni found Nico in the upstairs corridor, near the private library. He stood alone, staring at a painting on the wall like it was judging him. His jaw was clenched so hard it looked painful. Imoni hesitated. Staff weren't supposed to approach him. Not like this. But she spoke anyway, quiet, careful. You didn't do it, because you're weak. Nico didn't turn. His voice came out rough. You shouldn't be here. I know, Imoni said. But I saw your hands. Nico's shoulders tightened. My hands. They were shaking, she said. Not because you were scared, because you didn't want to become him. For the first time, Nico looked at her. Really looked. His eyes were dark and tired. You don't know what I am. Imani swallowed, heart pounding. I know what this house wants you to be. Nico exhaled, like the air had been trapped in his chest for years. They think I'm defective. Imani shook her head. No, she whispered. They're just afraid of what they can't control. Nico stared at her like she'd spoken a language he'd never heard. Then, quietly, he asked, "Why are you saying this to me?" Imani's fingers curled around the cloth in her hand, tight like a lifeline. Because she wasn't just being brave. She was being reckless. And she didn't fully understand why. But she said the truth anyway. Because I think they're lying about you. Nico's brow furrowed. Who's they? Imani glanced down the hall, cameras, guards, shadows. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice to a whisper that felt like a confession. The people around your father, she said. The ones who keep pushing you toward blood. Nico's throat bobbed. What are you talking about? Imani took a shaky breath. And this is where the story truly begins. Because Imani had seen something. Not a rumor. Not a guess. Something real. Something hidden. Something that could destroy the Marcelli Empire overnight. She leaned in and whispered. Someone inside this house wants you to fail. And I think I know who. Nico's eyes sharpened. For the first time, there was a spark. Not violence. Not cruelty. Something colder. Something smarter. Who? Nico asked. Imani hesitated. Because saying the name out loud could sign her death certificate. But she said it anyway. Capo Salvatore Griggs. Nico went still. Like the air turned to ice. Downstairs, laughter rose again. Men celebrating, drinking, pretending the air didn't just collapse in front of them. But upstairs. Upstairs, Nico stared at Imani like she'd handed him a loaded gun without touching metal. You're wrong, he whispered. Imani shook her head. I'm not. Nico's voice cracked. Griggs raised me. Imani's eyes didn't blink. And that's exactly why he knows how to break you. Nico's hands slowly tightened into fists. And then he asked a question that changed everything. What did you see? Imani swallowed. She reached into her apron pocket. And pulled out something small. Something she should never have touched. A velvet pouch. Nico stared at it. His face drained of color. Because he recognized it. Everyone in the family recognized it. It belonged to the Don. Imani's fingers trembled. I found this, she whispered. In a place it shouldn't have been. Nico's breathing stopped. Where? Imani's voice was barely air. In Griggs' office. Nico looked at the pouch like it was a grenade. Then he looked at Imani. Open it. Imani hesitated. Then she opened it. And inside was Don Marcelli's ring. Nico's knees nearly gave out. His voice came out like a child's. That's impossible. Imani's eyes were wet, terrified. Unless it isn't. Nico stared at the ring. Then whispered the sentence that ended chapter 1 like a bullet. If Griggs has my father's ring, then my father is either dead. Or about to be. And in that moment, Nico realized something terrifying. His weakness wasn't an accident. It was a plan. And the maid everyone ignored had just placed the entire empire in his hands. Power doesn't always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it whispers. And waits. That was the lesson Nico Marcelli learned the night he didn't sleep. Nico sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the velvet pouch in his hands like it might blink. Don Marcelli's ring. Gold, heavy, engraved with a crest every man in the family knew by heart. The symbol that opened doors. The symbol that sealed deaths. The ring never left his father's finger. Not for showers. Not for sleep. Not for negotiations that ended in blood. And yet, here it was. Nico's fingers shook as he closed the pouch again. Across the room, Imani stood stiffly by the door, hands clasped, heart pounding like it was trying to escape her chest. She had crossed a line tonight. A line that didn't forgive mistakes. Nico finally broke the silence. If anyone finds out you took this. His voice faded. Imani nodded. I know. He looked up at her, eyes hollow. They won't just kill you. She swallowed. I know. Nico exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Then why did you bring it to me? Imani hesitated. Because the real answer scared her too. Because if I brought it to anyone else, she said carefully, I'd already be dead. Nico didn't argue. He knew she was right. In this house, truth only survived when it chose the right person. And somehow, it had chosen him. Nico had been raised around killers, but he'd never been raised by them. His father kept him distant, protected, yes, but also untouched by the mechanics of cruelty. Nico never learned how deals were structured, how betrayals were sniffed out, how men tested each other with words sharper than knives. That education had gone to others. To men like Salvatore Griggs. Griggs had been a second father to Nico. He taught him chess. He taught him how to dress. He taught him how to shake a man's hand and read what wasn't being said. And all those lessons came flooding back now, with new meaning. Nico stood and crossed the room, opening the safe behind a painting. Inside were ledgers, old documents, family records, things his father never thought Nico would read. Because he never thought Nico would need to. You said you found it in Griggs' office, Nico said. Imani nodded. Top drawer. Locked. Nico froze. How did you open it? Imani's cheeks warmed. I didn't, she said. It was already open. That landed like a punch. Already open meant one thing. Griggs hadn't been careful. Because he hadn't been afraid. Nico's mind started moving, not fast, but deep. Like water sinking into cracks. Did you see anything else? He asked. Imani thought. Papers. Old ones. Maps. Phone numbers written by hand. Nico's pulse quickened. Did you touch them? No, she said quickly. I knew better. Good, Nico thought. Griggs taught her better than he taught me. Nico closed the safe and turned to her. From now on, he said quietly, you don't go near his office again. Imani frowned. But. Not yet, Nico cut in. If he thinks someone's watching him, he'll disappear. Imani studied Nico's face. The softness was still there. But something else had joined it. Focus. Control. The bite everyone said he lacked. It was waking up. Just not the way they expected. For the next 3 days, Nico did something that confused everyone in the house. He behaved exactly the same. He apologized. He avoided eye contact. He stayed out of meetings. To the guards and capos, it looked like humiliation had broken him. Rafe DeLuca even laughed at dinner. Guess the kid learned his place. Griggs smiled beside him. A slow, satisfied smile. But what no one noticed was that Nico had started listening. Really listening. He stopped filling the silence with words. He stopped reacting emotionally. He let men talk around him. And men always talked. They talked about shipments. They talked about alliances. They talked about who owed who favors. And Nico noticed something strange. Every conversation curved back to Griggs. Every decision passed through him. Every delay benefited him. Even his father deferred to him more than usual. It was subtle. But Nico had been trained, by Griggs himself, to spot patterns. And the pattern was clear. Griggs wasn't just preparing for power. He was already exercising it. Imani watched everything too. But from a different angle. She noticed which guards were reassigned. Which cameras were turned off for maintenance. Which rooms were suddenly off-limits. And one night, while cleaning the East Wing, she saw something that chilled her blood. A guard she didn't recognize. New. Military posture. No Marcelli tattoo. She asked another maid about him. The maid shrugged. Griggs guy. That was all. Griggs guy. Imani finished her shift with her nerves stretched thin and waited until after midnight, when the mansion settled into its fake sleep. Then she went to Nico's floor. She knocked twice. Paused. Once. The door opened. Nico pulled her inside quickly. What is it? He whispered. Imani spoke fast. Griggs is bringing in his own people. Nico's jaw tightened. How many? Enough. That was worse than a number. Nico paced. My father hasn't said anything. Imani's voice dropped. Maybe he doesn't know. Nico stopped. The thought hit him hard. If Griggs had moved this far, either the Don was blind or compromised. Nico reached for the velvet pouch again, holding it like a talisman. "If my father's alive," he said slowly, "he's in danger." Imani hesitated, then spoke the thought she'd been carrying alone. "And if he's not?" Nico finished it. "Then Griggs is already acting like the Don." Silence swallowed the room. Outside, a distant car door slammed. Nico made a decision. His first real one. "I need proof," he said. "Not suspicion. Not fear." Imani nodded. "Then you need eyes where you're not allowed." Nico looked at her. And in that moment, the power dynamic shifted. "You mean you?" Imani didn't flinch. "I've been invisible my whole life," she said. "I know how to stay that way." Nico's voice softened. "If this goes wrong." "It already has," she replied. "A beat." Then Nico reached into the pouch and slid the ring onto his finger. It was too big. It slipped slightly, but it fit enough. Imani stared. "You can't wear that." "I won't," Nico said. "Not outside this room." He closed his hand around it. "But I need to feel what it weighs." Imani understood. Power wasn't just force. It was responsibility. And Nico was finally lifting it. 2 nights later, Nico made a move that shocked the house. He asked Griggs for a private lesson. Chess. Just like when he was a boy. Griggs looked surprised, then pleased. "Of course," he said warmly. "I was worried you'd withdrawn." Withdrawn. The word tasted bitter. They sat in the library, the board between them. Griggs moved first. Aggressive opening. Always. Nico responded conservatively. Predictable. Exactly what Griggs expected. They played in silence for several minutes. Then Griggs spoke casually. "Your father's been tired lately." Nico didn't look up. "He's always tired." "Not like this." Nico paused, then made a move. "What do you mean?" Griggs leaned back. "Running an empire takes a toll. Sometimes, men need rest." Rest. Or removal. Nico kept his face neutral. "He hasn't mentioned stepping back." Griggs smiled. "Men like your father don't announce those things." Nico's fingers brushed the ring in his pocket. "And if he did?" Nico asked. "Who would lead?" Griggs didn't answer immediately. He moved a piece. Then said calmly, "Someone strong enough to protect the family." There it was. Not a declaration. A test. Nico met his eyes. Strength isn't always loud. Griggs' smile thinned. "No," he agreed. "But it's always decisive." Check. Nico looked down. He was losing. Just like always. But then he saw it. A move Griggs taught him years ago. One that sacrificed a piece to win the board. Nico moved. Griggs froze. The room went very still. "Interesting," Griggs said slowly. "You taught me that," Nico replied. Griggs chuckled, recovering. "So I did." They finished the game. Griggs won. But not cleanly. As they stood, Griggs placed a hand on Nico's shoulder. "You'll find your place," he said kindly. "Just make sure it's the right one." Nico nodded. But inside, he knew something now. Griggs hadn't expected resistance. Even quiet resistance. That meant the clock was moving. Fast. That same night, the mansion erupted. A gunshot. Then screaming. Nico ran barefoot down the hall. Imani followed. They reached the east stairwell and froze. A body lay at the bottom. One of the Don's old guards. Blood soaked the marble. Griggs stood above him, barking orders. "Lock the house down." When Griggs saw Nico, his face shifted instantly. Concern. Authority. "Stay back," he ordered. "This is ugly." Nico's eyes dropped to the guard's hand. Empty. But the guard always wore a ring. Not the Don's. A family marker. It was missing. Nico looked up slowly. "What happened?" Griggs' voice was smooth. "An intruder." He resisted. Nico nodded. But inside, something clicked. This wasn't chaos. It was cleanup. Imani caught Nico's eye. She had seen it too. Griggs walked away to handle the scene. Nico leaned close to Imani and whispered. This wasn't a warning. Imani's voice shook. It was a message. Nico stared at the blood spreading across the floor. No, he corrected. It was a countdown. Because Nico finally understood the truth. Griggs wasn't preparing to overthrow the Don. He was preparing to erase him. And if Nico didn't act soon, there would be no father left to save. Violence is loud. Control is quiet. Nico Marcelli chose quiet. By morning, the mansion looked normal again. Blood scrubbed from marble. Furniture reset. Guards back at their posts. To the outside world, nothing had happened. Inside Nico's chest, everything had. He stood at his bedroom window watching the driveway fill with morning cars, deliveries, aides, men who believed the house was still under Don Marcelli's rule. Griggs had moved first. Clean. Efficient. That meant Nico was behind. Imani knocked softly and slipped inside, closing the door with the care of someone who understood how thin walls could be. They ruled it an intruder, she whispered. No investigation. Nico nodded. Because investigations find things, he said. And Griggs doesn't want that. Imani hesitated. Then what do you want? Nico turned from the window. For the first time since this started, his voice didn't shake. I want proof that can't be buried. Nico couldn't order men. He couldn't call meetings. He couldn't threaten. But he could do something Griggs never worried about. He could ask questions that sounded harmless. He started with the old accountant, Eli Rosen, a nervous man everyone forgot because he never raised his voice. Nico found him in the records room, surrounded by boxes no one had opened in years. My father asked me to learn how the books work, Nico lied gently. Eli blinked. He did. Nico nodded with practiced uncertainty. He said you'd help me. Men like Eli lived for relevance. He didn't question it. For 3 hours, Eli talked. About shell companies. About offshore accounts. About emergency funds only the Don could access. And Nico noticed something. The Don signature appeared less and less over the last 6 months. Griggs' initials appeared more. That normal? Nico asked casually. Eli stiffened. Well, no, he admitted. But Mr. Griggs said the Don wanted him to handle things. Nico smiled faintly. That sounds like my father, he said. Eli relaxed. But Nico's mind locked onto the detail. Control without visibility. That was Griggs' style. While Nico gathered paper, Imani gathered something more dangerous. People. She started with the staff. The cooks. The cleaners. The night guards who didn't belong to Griggs. She didn't ask questions. She listened. And patterns emerged. Guards reassigned after disagreeing with Griggs. Drivers disappearing for other work. Phones confiscated quietly. One older cook whispered something that made Imani's stomach drop. They moved the Don, the cook said. Late night. Stretcher. Imani's breath caught. Where? The cook shook her head. Didn't see. But Griggs was there. Imani left the kitchen shaking. She found Nico in the library and told him everything. Nico closed his eyes. The last piece slid into place. He's alive, Nico said. Or he was. Imani swallowed. Then why hide him? Nico opened his eyes. And there it was. The answer. Because if my father dies publicly, Nico said, the family votes on succession. Imani's voice was tight. And you'd lose. Nico nodded. But if he dies quietly? He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Nico's move came disguised as weakness. He asked Griggs for help. Again. This time, with numbers. I'm lost, Nico admitted one afternoon, standing in Griggs' office like a boy who needed saving. My father wanted me to understand the finances. Griggs' eyes flicked to Nico's face. Then softened. Exactly as Nico hoped. Of course, Griggs said warmly. You should have come sooner. He opened files. Explained slowly. Patiently. And he made a mistake. He assumed Nico didn't understand the danger. Griggs pulled up a ledger, one he shouldn't have. A contingency fund. A fund designed to activate only if the Don was incapacitated. Nico leaned closer. What's that? Griggs froze for half a second. Then smiled. Insurance. Nico nodded, pretending confusion. But inside, something snapped into focus. Griggs wasn't waiting anymore. He was operating under the assumption the Don would never return. That night, Nico used the ring. Not to command. To open a door. He slipped it on, walked to the security office, and placed his hand on the scanner. It hesitated, then unlocked. Inside, the head of security, Marcus Vale, looked up sharply. "Sir." Nico swallowed. This was the edge. "I need the medical transfer logs," Nico said. "From last week." Marcus frowned. "Those are restricted." Nico met his eyes. And for the first time, he didn't look away. "My father's name is on them," Nico said quietly. "And if I find out something happened to him without my consent." He let the sentence die. Marcus studied him. Long. Then nodded once. 5 minutes. When the logs appeared, Nico's heart pounded. One transfer. Unmarked ambulance. Private facility. Location code only. Imani stood beside him, reading over his shoulder. "That's not a hospital," she whispered. Nico's jaw hardened. "No," he said. "That's a holding site." Nico didn't confront Griggs. He didn't accuse him. He did something far worse. He exposed him, quietly. Using the accountant's help, Nico redirected a single transaction. Small. Precise. A payment Griggs expected to go through. It didn't. Instead, it bounced. And the Chicago crew noticed. Rafe DeLuca called Griggs directly. Nico overheard the argument from the hallway. "You said everything was secure," Rafe snapped. Griggs' voice was tight. "It is." "Then why is my money frozen?" Silence. A pause too long. "Fix it," Rafe growled. "Or I start asking questions." Griggs ended the call. And for the first time, he looked rattled. That night, Nico slept for 2 hours. It was the best sleep he'd had in weeks. Because he'd done it. Without a gun. Without blood. He had killed Griggs' confidence. And confidence was the oxygen of power. Griggs struck back fast. The next morning, Imani was pulled aside by security. Routine questioning. Too polite. Too calm. Nico found her later, pale. "They know," she whispered. "Not everything. But enough." Nico's chest tightened. "Did you say anything?" "No." "Good," Nico said. "Because now we move." Imani looked at him. "Move where?" Nico held up the transfer code. "To my father." Imani's eyes widened. "That place is guarded." Nico nodded. "So is this house." A beat. "And Griggs can't guard both." "They didn't go themselves. They sent proof. An anonymous packet. Photos of the ledger. Copies of the transfer logs. A note written in Nico's careful hand. If Don Marcelli is alive, you have 24 hours to contact your son. If not, this goes public. They sent it to Griggs. And waited. The response came sooner than expected. A car pulled into the driveway at midnight. No announcement. No entourage. Just one man stepping out. Griggs. He didn't look calm. He walked straight into the mansion. Straight toward Nico. Imani felt the shift before Nico did. This wasn't a warning. It was a reckoning. Griggs entered the library where Nico waited. The door closed behind him. No guards. No witnesses. "You're smarter than you look," Griggs said quietly. Nico stood. "You taught me." Griggs smiled thinly. "And now you're in danger." Nico tilted his head. "From you." Griggs stepped closer. "From the truth," he replied. "Your father is weak. This family needs strength." Nico's voice stayed even. "You mean it needs you?" Griggs' smile vanished. "I mean it needs survival." Nico reached into his pocket. Not for a weapon. For a phone. He pressed play. His father's voice filled the room. Weak. Breathing hard. Alive. "Nico, if you're hearing this, trust no one but yourself." Griggs froze. For the first time, fear flickered. Nico met his eyes. "You lose," Nico said softly. Griggs laughed once, sharp, dangerous. "No," he replied. "Now, you bleed." Griggs turned for the door. Alarms erupted. The mansion locked down. Nico didn't smile. But inside, something settled. The boy with no bite was gone. Because Griggs was no longer hiding. And when predators stop hiding, someone always dies. The loudest men die first. The quiet ones decide when. Nico Marcelli decided tonight. The mansion sealed itself in stages. Steel shutters slid down over windows. Magnetic locks snapped shut. Cameras pivoted inward. Red lights pulsed along the corridors like a warning heartbeat. Griggs had triggered the protocol himself. That was his mistake. Because the lockdown system had been designed for one purpose only: to protect the Don from everyone else, including the man who thought he'd replaced him. Nico stood perfectly still in the library as footsteps thundered outside. Guards shouting. Orders colliding. Imani slipped in behind him, breathless. "They're sealing the east wing," she whispered. "Griggs is pulling his people back." Nico nodded. "Good." Imani stared. "Good." "He's afraid," Nico said calmly. "That means he's blind." He reached for the phone again, dialed a number he'd memorized hours earlier. It rang once. Twice. Then a raspy voice answered. "Speak." Nico's throat tightened. "Dad." Silence. Then a breath, ragged, disbelieving. "Nico." Imani covered her mouth. Nico closed his eyes. "I'm here," he said. "I know where you are." The Don coughed. "Griggs." "I know," Nico replied. "Don't talk. Listen." He gave instructions, short, precise. Routes. Timing. Names of guards who still answered to the Marcelli blood. The Don listened. For the first time in years. He didn't interrupt. The holding facility was 20 miles south. No sign. No records. Just a converted warehouse with medical equipment and men paid not to ask questions. Griggs had built it for silence. Nico used silence against him. The convoy arrived without sirens. No threats. No shouting. Just doors opening. The guards inside surrendered without a shot. Because Nico had already frozen their accounts. Taken their leverage. Men with nothing to protect, don't fight. Imani waited in the van as Nico stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Disinfectant. Blood. Fear. He followed the sound of breathing. And found his father. Don Vittorio Marcelli lay on a hospital bed, thinner, pale, eyes sunken but sharp. Still sharp. They stared at each other. Years of distance. Years of disappointment. Years of silence. The Don spoke first. "You shouldn't be here." Nico smiled faintly. "You taught me to finish what others start." The Don studied him, really studied him. Not as a liability. Not as an heir. As a man. "You planned this," the Don said quietly. Nico nodded. "Without killing anyone." The Don closed his eyes. And laughed once. Weak. Proud. They brought the Don back before dawn. Griggs was still inside the mansion. Waiting. Pacing. Losing control minute by minute. When the front doors opened and the Don stepped inside, supported, alive, unmistakable, the house went silent. Griggs froze mid-order. His face drained. Impossible. The Don lifted a hand. The room obeyed instantly. "You did well," the Don said to Griggs softly. "Almost." Griggs recovered fast. "You were sick," he said. "I protected the family." The Don nodded. "You protected yourself." Griggs turned to Nico. "He manipulated you," Griggs snapped. "Used your weakness." Nico didn't respond. He didn't need to. The Don looked at his son. "Tell him," he said. Nico stepped forward. And spoke calmly. "You rerouted funds. You isolated loyal guards. You hid my father to avoid a succession vote. You killed men who noticed." Each sentence landed like a nail. Griggs laughed, desperate now. "You can't prove any of it." Nico lifted a folder. "I don't have to," he said. "Chicago already knows." Griggs' smile vanished. "You what?" "Your frozen money." Nico continued. "It unfroze. To them. With an explanation." Griggs took a step back. The Don spoke again. "You see," he said, voice iron. "My son understands something you never did." Griggs looked between them. "And what's that?" Nico answered. "Power doesn't need permission." The Don raised his hand. Two guards stepped forward. Not Griggs' men. Old Marcelli blood. "Take him," the Don said. Griggs didn't resist. He stared at Nico as they dragged him away. "You'll destroy this family," Griggs hissed. You don't have the stomach for what comes next. Nico leaned close and whispered the truth. That's why I'll survive. The doors closed behind Griggs. No gunshot followed, because death would have been mercy. Hours later, the mansion rested in exhausted silence. The Don sat in his office, wrapped in a blanket, city lights flickering behind him. Nico stood across from him. Not as a boy. As a successor. I was wrong about you, the Don said finally. Nico said nothing. I thought strength meant force, the Don continued. You showed me restraint. He looked up. The family will never follow you out of fear. Nico met his gaze. They don't have to. A long pause. Then the Don reached into his pocket and removed the ring. He held it out. They'll follow you because they won't see you coming. Nico didn't take it immediately. He looked at the ring. Then at his father. Not yet. The Don raised an eyebrow. When? Nico answered simply. When you're ready to rest. The Don smiled. Not because he was relieved. Because he was proud. Imani waited by the window, watching dawn crack the sky open. Nico joined her. You could leave, he said quietly. Now. Imani looked at him. And do what? Nico hesitated. Then said something no one had ever said to her. Help me. She studied his face. The calm. The certainty. The absence of cruelty. You're not like them, she said. Nico nodded. That's the point. She extended her hand. He took it. Not a romance. A pact. Word spread fast. Not about blood. About silence. Chicago backed down. Accounts stabilized. Capos adjusted. No purge. No chaos. Just a shift. Men began asking. Who moved the money? Who froze the deals? Who ended Griggs without firing a shot? And the answer unsettled them. The Don's weak son. The heir with no bite. Weeks later, Nico stood alone in the Don's office. The city moved beneath him, unaware, unchanged. He slid the ring onto his finger. This time, it fit. Imani stood behind him. They'll fear you, she said. Nico shook his head. They'll underestimate me. He looked out at the city. And that's worse. Because the most dangerous mafia boss in America wasn't raised to kill. He was raised to wait.